Welcome, Nolan, Bitcoiner, another episode of The Breakup, a show where we contrast fiat relationships with Bitcoin relationships. It's a relationship show. It's about psychology engines and what pushes economies forward. In this case, what might win a war. Unfortunately, we got to talk about war a lot because that stuff is starting and all around us. One of the frames we use here to discuss what's going on is that World War III perhaps is best viewed between individuals fighting their countries or countries fighting their individuals. That's probably a better way to put it. I think the events of the past few days in Ukraine and Russia have more than anything really made the parties of World War III vivid and real, and you can now picture them and see them in contrast with each other. And this show is about contrast. We're trying to contrast a fiat standard, dollars with Bitcoin, but everything else at the same time. It really is sort of a contrasting worldview, a clash of civilizations, if you will. And with everything that's gone on in the past few days, particularly between China, Russia, we start to see the real parties in World War III. So in World War II, we thought of it as Axis and allies. Axis and allies. And it's like a game, right? Axis and allies. Everyone played the game Axis and allies. It's a lot like Risk. It's a slightly different version, but the same idea, strategy game. Axis and allies, of course, were the two teams, if you will. Do we call it teams now? Is it a team sport? The two teams of World War II, of course, were England, the United States, Canada, France joined. Those were all the allies. We all know this. The Axis were Germany, Italy, Japan. The players have changed now. And with what's gone on in the past few days, we can actually see the game itself start to take shape. And there's pieces to the game. So there's the players, who's on which team. There's the type of money they have. They all have different money. We're going to contrast those. They have different information systems where they get information. And finally, they all have different strategies to win. It's a game. You want to win the game. Right? You can't just play the game and not want to win. So there is a way to play the game to win. So like I was saying, everything that happened this weekend started to show us in vivid relief the three different teams playing in World War III. And this here, these Chinese characters, of course, represent China. I don't have yellow to make the flag, so I decided to do the Chinese characters. We've got Russia. And then we heard just yesterday that the PM of Pakistan, Imran Khan, has announced that he'll import 2 million tons of wheat from Russia this year, as well as natural gas. So it looks like President Khan, or Prime Minister Khan, has joined the Axis team. And I think most people knew that. But these are the kinds of things you want to look for. You want to look for these partnerships. You want to look for these arrangements, negotiations. And there's a reason why you want to look for those arrangements and negotiations. On February 4th, it turns out that China and Russia met and signed well over $1 billion worth of commodity agreements. And the reason why you want to know about all these agreements is because they show that the money strategy here has changed. We talked about it yesterday in the show, but when everyone talks today about the ruble collapsing, remember, the ruble is not really the wealth of Russia any longer. That's wealth in some people's pocketbooks, but that's not the only metric. When Russia exited the petrodollar, they exited the fiat system almost simultaneously. SWIFT kicking them off was pretty much the end of the road. But psychologically, you have to ask, were they prepared for that? Of course, everyone knew that was going to happen. So what's been going on? It's the oil and the wheat. It's a commodity-based economy more than ever. And the currency of this block, these axes, will not be subject to just the poker game of foreign exchange based on relative value against the US dollar. It now has its own fundamentals, if you will. It has its own metrics, its own ways to measure it, its own performance indicators. Is it GDP? I don't think so. It's something else. It's the amount of oil sold. We saw the deal signed between Gazprom just yesterday. 50 billion cubic tons. I can't understand what that means. How big is that? Is it as big as Lake Superior or the Great Lakes? I don't know. It's a lot of oil, I guess. I can't picture it, but it sounds like it's enough to make sure that the exchange rate between the ruble and the dollar isn't really the only performance indicator. The second one, and this is a sad issue, I think, and it comes from Well, let's go back. I want to talk about two more things about the money piece. So Putin predicted this in 2019. And Ben Rickert on Twitter reminds us that you were warned in 2019. This war is financial more than it is kinetic. If you're waiting for escalating kinetic action, you'll miss the real war, cyber and financial. And he referred to a quote from Putin in 2019 where Putin said, the dollar enjoyed great trust around the world, but for some reason it is being used as a political weapon, imposing restrictions. Many countries are now turning away from the dollar as a reserve currency. The US dollar will collapse. Now, this is Putin, so you have to understand he's definitely trying to project change. This was already a type of psychological warfare. So it's not just an opinion. He's definitely trying to persuade with it. We also see that, this is the sad part now, that Onye Nizuki, I follow him, or I'm going to pronounce, I won't be able to pronounce his name properly. He's from Nigeria. Onye Nikuzi, he's got a ton of followers, and I've been following him for a long time because Nigeria and Bitcoin have been related for a long time, that I've been trying to cultivate sources for a few years now on what's going on in Nigeria. And I've been following him for a long time. He mentions Bitcoin occasionally, but got a great worldview and is definitely useful when you're trying to find out what's going on in Nigeria. And here was his take on the Ukraine-Russia situation. And in particular, he was quoting the Netflix getting rid of Russian users, Spotify getting rid of Russian users, Apple Pay and Google Pay. If anyone saw the images online of Muscovites trying to use the subway today and their Apple Pay and their Google Pay didn't work and they couldn't access the subway. So Onye writes about all of this stuff. So Netflix in the Russian war, Spotify, Apple Pay, Google Pay, all the other platforms. Onye says, this is a terrible strategic blunder by the West, which they will regret decades down the line. It will simply now grow the appeal of the Chinese Great Firewall internet model, as non-Western aligned powers will simply not trust Western platforms. And it underlines the sort of fragility of that system. And when we start to now look into the players in the game, so we see that commodity, instead of fiat, it's going to be this oil and wheat piece. For info, we've now pushed Russia. So this was one of the things that was actually good, if there's anything good about a war. One of the good things leading into this Russia-Ukraine war is that we could all imagine that most Russian civilians use the same internet as everybody else in the world. I don't know if that's true this week. It was true last week. Is it true this week? Can Russians just go on any website they feel like they used to? I don't know the answer. I don't know. I suspect it won't be much longer before they're on this side of the internet. That's just what I feel. But if you're gonna spin information to that extent, if you're going to, especially with the warfare that Russia is engaging in from a social media and information point of view, they certainly can't allow the prowess and ability of the Ukrainian media machine to push into the minds of Russians. So I would imagine the internet is suppressed there to a certain extent now, or at least it's starting to look like the firewall. The prediction here is that you've actually got two information systems. The contrast here is that we've got the internet, and I put a trademark on this internet because even the internet that we know in America is no longer the internet that we thought we knew and grew up with. And I can give you a few reasons to even understand it. And it's not really suppression. It's not really censorship per se, even though that exists. We saw what happened in Canada, and there certainly was censorship. But it looks more like this. This is from Leighton Woodhouse, who's a journalist, a writer. He's on Substack, but he's all over the place as well. And here's a piece he wrote today. News consumers should understand it's almost impossible at the moment to get an editor's attention on anything non-Ukraine related. So if you want to be published right now, you basically have to write about Ukraine, even if you don't know a goddamn thing about it. At moments like this, the economy of the media is thus aligned to produce shitty superficial takes, even more so than usual. I myself don't know shit about Ukraine, but just wrote about it anyway, for the first and last time. I kind of regret it already. So Leighton is showing you here that it's not even that the internet itself is, that the internet we know in the West is willing to kick off and have platforms that will kick off users from countries if there's an issue. the mindset going into it is also to appease the owners of the platforms in order to get the amplification that you want by spreading a message. So in all these instances, you get people who have to take these superficial takes. There's no other kind of way around it. You've also got the West experiencing a type of corruption, the Allies. And this is from Dominique Régnier. So Dominique Régnier is a professor at a place called the IEP, the Institut d'études politiques. Sciences Po, in other words. Sciences Po is the French version of Harvard, I guess, the Kennedy School of Business. I went to it, but not the one in Paris. I went to one in the Alps. There's 7 of them around the country. And basically every president and prime minister of France comes from this school. Everyone. I don't think there's ever been a case where it didn't happen. Maybe the guy now, Macron, because he's a bit different. But from what I remember, absolutely everyone from the school. And the reason the school was set up in the first place was the French believed, the French leader after World War II believed sincerely that the reason why France lost was because the civil service was too weak and gave in so quickly to the Nazis and intellectually weren't strong enough. So his reasoning was to create a really powerful educational institution that would make the top ranking civil servants of France immune to the type of buckling under pressure that they experienced when the Germans first took over under Hitler. So all this to say, Dominique Régnier, really respected guy on all sides. If you go to the school and you're running stuff, you're a little untouchable in France. You're beyond partisan politics in some ways, although this guy sounds pretty partisan from sometimes. So it's not always that way. But here's his quote. We found that Gazprom funded environmental NGOs that provided ministers to various governments, such as Belgium, which advocated abandoning nuclear power. What he's basically saying is that the Sciences Po in France, this guy, is sure that NGOs in Europe, governments as well, took money from Russian Gazprom in order to deny the future exploration and development and to stop the use of nuclear power in Europe. So again, they've got an internet. The Allies have an internet, but the problem with the internet they have is that it's corrupted morally on the inside by people who use it and all the institutions that are there. They know how to game some of the system. You can put out a bunch of research about how nuclear is so dangerous, and you might just get a Russian pipeline instead, right? You can do that. That's possible. And that's what might have happened. I don't have proof. I don't have proof that's happened. I'm only saying what Dominique is saying here, but sounds believable to me. Sounds real believable. So we see that these 2 different systems, 2 different players, we've got 2 different financial systems, we've got different information systems, finally, strategy. How are they going to win? You got to have a strategy to win in a game. You can't just play a game and then not expect to win. In the case of the Axis, the strategy is MAD, mutually assured destruction. They know they can't beat the United States in a straight up fistfight with all the bombs and the missiles and the craziness. No one wins that war. Everybody loses. Everybody loses. So that's part of the bargaining here. That's part of the bargaining. In the case of the Allies, the recipe here is growth. It always has been growth. It always was make China so rich that they'll become comfortable democracies like the West. They'll become westernized by growth and consumption and all of the things that are offered by the Allies that go back to the Marshall Plan, that go back to an era where America said, okay, you can consume like us now. You can start consuming more because we're gonna have peace through consumption. This is not a new idea. This has been going on for some time. What's interesting now, if we start to talk about the 2 contrasts that we've sort of understand that we talk about a lot, but now also start to talk about the third party. And the third party is where things get really interesting. And I call them the ables. So you've got the Axis and you've got the Allies and you've got the ables. Satoshi, of course, we got to make Satoshi the first able. That's whatever we do from now on, it's always Satoshi first. We saw what Elon Musk did yesterday, right? Elon Musk sent the Starlink internet to Ukraine, the actual antennas. He put the satellites in space above them to create the signal, thereby empowering every Ukrainian in this war zone with a reliable internet network. He also took away the negotiating chip of Russian rockets. And that was, I think, a really huge move. And he's also got his fight with the SEC back home right now, which should stop the financial manipulation, at least of his own stock, and hopefully for everyone else to start getting more transparency on short sellers. More than anything, get more transparency into the SEC itself, because he's suing the SEC. And I believe part of the disclosure process will unveil all kinds of personal failings in the SEC, which I'm looking forward to. I think everyone's looking forward to that. Next, let's contrast the money for a second. So I've got body here. Well, what do I mean? I could say it's proof of work or it's digital money, but what is digital money? Digital money, the ones and zeros, that's kind of it. But it's not really the power. Digits are also your fingers. They're also part of your body. You can actually manage Bitcoin with your own brain and your fingers, and you'll be fine. The money is actually in your head. There is no money. We know that. It's cryptographic keys and secrets that you're able to keep. And if you can keep these passphrases, seed phrases, if you can keep your head in it, you can actually store your Bitcoin where it belongs in your body. And that's a totally different thing. So one system has commodities for money. The other uses fiat, the dictates. And finally, the last one uses the body. Next, info. We remember it was a firewall. It's banned. Everyone knows the Chinese firewall. We've got the trademarked internet now. But what do Bitcoiners use? Well, Bitcoiners use mining. Right? They use mining. And when we think of not just mining for the information to find a block, it's more that Bitcoiners are able to really extend the idea of don't trust, verify to almost any realm. It's not just limited to how much Bitcoin is in your wallet. Did your transaction go through, right? Did you check your block explorer? Did your Bitcoin get to the recipient? I don't think that's what anyone's talking about when they're saying to verify, not trust. I think what they're saying is you're always going to be, everyone's going to try and roll you. Everyone's going to try and persuade you and influence you. And that's just a natural state of being. You can't avoid that. But what you can do is have a good system to take all that information in, sort it, and then make real conclusions. So it's a bit like the mind in the sense that you need to keep some degree of clarity and measuredness when you're hearing all this stuff. And you have to be on guard. You have to be on guard. The whole idea of verifying and not trusting is to stay on guard against all this stuff. Finally, strategy. So the Axis have mutually assured destruction, not that attractive. The Allies have growth, a little less believable now. Do you believe it can keep growing without all this? These guys are gone. As far as I can tell, they're gone. They're not part of it anymore. So does it still grow? Is Europe going to be what the whole thing grows off of? I can see Central America, South America. I can certainly see terraformation, turning deserts into green, beautiful areas. So there is a lot of room to grow. I don't want to take this away from a potential strategy to win. It's still in play, but it's not really necessarily going to get us there. And what else are we going to grow? Americans have been footing the bill for global consumption growth by becoming themselves huge consumers. And a lot of people think that it just increases the hole inside people's soul, right? More eating doesn't really fill you up spiritually. And a lot of times when we talk about time preference and the things that Bitcoin can do just by making saving easy again and by making quality premium because of the time spent on it and the investment of time to be good at things. And all of this stuff comes down to a sort of spiritual realignment. And that's really the plan on winning. The plan that Bitcoiners have to win is to make everybody a Bitcoiner, make everyone be capable of saving their money and their time to spend on things they want, that they really want, not that they were told that they want, that they really want. And when you add all this up and you start thinking about the ables, you take a guy like Jesse Powell. Now, look at what Jesse's done just in the past few days. We've got Coinbase asked by the authorities to help with the Russian sanctions. Coinbase says, A blanket ban would punish ordinary Russian citizens enduring historic currency destabilization as a result of their government's aggression against a democratic neighbor. I mentioned Coinbase. I'll get to Kraken. Jesse Powell being the CEO of Kraken. So that was Coinbase, big exchange. CZ at Binance said, we will not unilaterally freeze millions of innocent users' accounts, right? Again, these guys are in the ables category. Jesse Powell, again, we cannot freeze the accounts of our Russia clients without a legal requirement to do so. Now, remember, Jesse was in the Canadian trenches fighting over there as well, saying, we can't help you. They're going to come and take it. We got to give them because they have the legal requirement. What I can tell you is take your Bitcoin off exchanges. And he advised all Americans simultaneous to what was going on in Canada that what was going on in Canada was coming for them too. So preparing people to be on those different sides. And Jesse has a history of doing this. He did it years ago in New York, when New York was asking for all this data on users, and to double the data, the New York Attorney General was asking for the financial superintendents, which is kind of like an attorney general. He said, get out of here. I'm not dealing with New York State. Beat it, losers. And that was the right answer. That was the right answer. And to this day, you've got to imagine that he's seen the participants in this war for a long time now. And there's no doubt on what side he can be found. So when you add this up, and then you even take a look at Ukraine in all of this, and you say to yourself, well, Ukraine, are they on the Allies side? Are they on the Axis side? Hard to say. There's a lot they could have done in the United States to make things better, we think. There's a lot they could do today to make all of this trouble go away. But one thing we know about them, and this is from Zach Vole, who used to work at CoinDesk and is now with Compass Mining, he reminds us that just last year in 2021, Ukraine, which is one of the highest incidences of Bitcoin adoption in the world, check this out. Even though there's been 150 Bitcoin donated to the Ukrainians for the ongoing war, he mentioned that a city councilman in Ukraine has 18,000 Bitcoins in public disclosure. There are 24 Ukrainian politicians with over 100 Bitcoins each. There are 652 total Ukrainian officials that hold Bitcoin. So you can start to see that the ables are being joined by more and more people that have resources, infrastructure. And it's not just about countries being in either one of these. It's all kinds of people joining the ables. And now when I actually stop and think about it, and I look at the names, and if you wonder about all the stuff that's going on, you can actually see another way of calling these teams. You can say that this is actually this is Xi's, right? This is Xi's team, right? That's Xi's team. Allies, well, if I just move it over a little, I think it looks better like that, right? We got Xi's team, then we've got the all lies, and then we've got what? A blessing, right? Those are our three teams. We got Xi's team, we got the lies, and we got the blessing. So it's not Axis, Allies, and Ables. Different names. But these are their strategies. These are the things they have to compete in World War III. And we'll see. I think it's a fair fight. We'll see who wins. That's the breakup for today.